I think that's everything. We can get into our list now.
Yeah, we have the top 10 shortstops in baseball. What a fun time. What a glorious day to talk about the top 10 shortstops
Shortstop
in baseball.
position.
Yeah, and yes, for just before we get into it, if you're curious about what we think the top 10 first baseman, center fielders or catchers are, check out the previous three episodes. We've already done three of these. This is our fourth list. And yeah, this is a what we think they will do, or where we think they will rank in 2025, like who we think will have the best seasons. So yeah, it's not necessarily all about what they have done, but kind of pointing out some signs of what they've done and thinking how this will translate to 2025. So yeah, we'll use some underlying stats like exit velocity, expected stats, batted ball distribution, things like that, to talk about what these players potentially could do this upcoming year. But yeah, without further ado, who is your number 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball?
So my number 10 is a guy that I had on my list last year, of which there are seven on this list, including one complete newcomer and two guys that were uh, not shortstops, but on lists of mine last year. Number 10 is a guy that I had at number five last year. So it sounds like he had some sort of big down year that, made him fall down the list. And that's not even really the case. It's just given the talent of this position and what I think is going to happen going forward. This is what led to putting Trey Turner number 10, which is not really something that I thought I'd do going into this list, but just looking at the talent, I think there simply are nine better shortstops this year. Trey Turner time with an injury last year, and with all our sample size and whatnot, did have a better offensive season than he did in 2023. A higher OB, a higher slugging, a higher OPS. Obviously, he didn't have the slump that he did for a few months in that 2023 season, but he also didn't have the big offensive surge that he had late that year either. But regardless, the overall numbers were still better. Now that being said, there are some things that I'm a little concerned about with Trey Turner. The first of all, the base running value wasn't exactly there last year to the same degree that it always has been. He's still an elite base runner. He just happens to have been overtaken a few guys, which is a natural thing that happens when you're 31 years old and all of the best base runners are in their early to mid 20s. Which obviously when that goes, that's kind of when you've lost the foundation of what Trey Turner is. Doesn't mean that he's not a great player, but his sweet spot rate went down by nearly 6% last year. His walk rate went down to a career low. His ground ball rate rose by 40%, or excuse me, by 7%. It went up from 40% to 47%. His fly ball rate went down 4%. His line drive rate went down by 2%. A lot of his batted ball metrics were a bit concerning. The one good thing, though, is that his pull rate on fly balls was 32.4% in 2024, which is a career high for him. But if that number goes back down, I do feel we could see maybe a down year offensively for Trey Turner with everything else going the way that it has in the last year. That's why he's my number 10, is because, this is the list based on how I expect him to be this year. I like that number, but it seems like there's a little too much that it hinges on, staying the same, going up, going down, whatever. Given the talent on this list, I do still think he's a very solid player. He might be on my top 50 list, but he just happens to be 10 at this particular position.
Right, right. Yeah. I'll keep talking about Trey Turner because he's my number 10 as well. He was my number six last year. But yeah, he's heading into his age 32 season. He ranked 10th among shortstops in F4 last year, and he ranks 8th over the last 2 years. And yeah, I do share some of the concerns that you have on the offensive side and in both sides of the offensive side with base running and hitting. He's coming off career lows in expected batting average and expected WOBA in seasons in which he had at least 50 plate appearances, which is not, a very high minimum to have. And he also had a career low in sprint speed, and that sprint speed dropped by zero point 0.7 feet per second from 2023 to 2024. And that partially led to him having the lowest number of stolen bases he's had in a season where he's played 60 plus games. And yeah, a notable stat from last year is he had 10 stolen bases in the first 33 games of the year. Then he hit the IL with a strained hamstring and then had 9 stolen bases in the final 88 games of the year. So he basically went from stealing a base every 3 games to stealing a base every 10 games after that strained hamstring. So I guess it could raise both optimism and excuse me,
Pessimism.
pessimism. But because it could mean that maybe he just needed more time to recover, and he's using the offseason to recover and potentially gain that speed back because that sprint speed drop was a little bit dramatic. But it also could mean that that hamstring did is lingering, and it could just mean he is slower, and we shouldn't be expecting the same level of base running. I'm sure there's some sort of balance between the two. But yeah, because of the I guess drop in some of the underlying offensive stuff and the general base running ability. He drops down the list um and and makes him number 10. If it was a list based on, you know, um the past 2 to 3 years of performances, he would certainly be up this list. But in terms of what I think he will do in 2025, I think he'll be the 10th best shortstop. Who do you have at number 9?
At number nine, I'm sticking with the same guy that I had at number nine on my list last year. This is a guy that will be playing a new team in 2025 after being signed to a $182 million contract with the San Francisco Giants. It is Willie Adames. Yeah, he was my number nine last year. Is sticking at the same place this year, and had a very solid season in 2024. Had a rise in OPS going up to 793. Runs again and also steal 21 bases. So, all around solid offensive performer with some very good, batted ball metrics. The expected slugging was over 460. The barrel rate has been over 11% for each of the last 4 seasons. He also had a career high in sweet spot rate at 38.2%. The fly ball rate actually outpaced the ground ball rate this year, which is always something that I really like in players with any semblance of power, which is something that Willie Adames has. His defense is a very interesting thing. It was a 1 point out above average last year, and some average looking numbers on Fangraphs. Mike Petriello, our good friend, pointed this out in a defensive thread earlier this winter. Out of 305 qualifying shortstops since 2016, Adames' estimated success rate, which was 68%, was tied for the third lowest. It had also been over 75% in each of the other full seasons he's played. So essentially, some of the reasons why maybe you saw a defensive decrease for Willie Adames last year is simply because the plays he had to make were harder. Which seems like it would be more of a luck thing than anything. Like I mentioned, a 68% expected success rate, which was very low. I believe tied for the lowest of any shortstop this year, the third lowest of every shortstop season since 2016, and also a sharp decrease from what he's used to. I believe that could be a fluke and it could go back to normal next year with the Giants. And, I think he'll become an elite defender again. Excuse me. I think he can become an elite defender again with the Giants. And, like I mentioned, I think that offense can continue. I know leaving American Family Field maybe isn't the best thing, but I don't think that the decrease should be drastic if it exists at all. So I'm going to put Willie Adames at 9.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fair assessment. My number 9, I'm sure you have this guy probably a good bit ahead of 9. I have Carlos Correa at number 9. He was my number 10 last year. And yeah, with Carlos Correa, he's heading into his age 30 season. He finished ninth among shortstops in F4 last year, despite only playing 86 games. And yeah, he had some major improvements, definitely on the surface, some major improvements from 2023 to 2024. His OPS plus increased from 94 to 152. And also he had some significant drops in strikeout rate and whiff rate. I think, strikeout rate dropped by like 6 percentage points or something like that, which is a, pretty major difference from year to year. What I will say about some of that offensive improvement is a lot of other things under the surface stayed pretty similar, which, I think some of the things that explained his on the surface stuff improving was not necessarily fully in his control. So what I'll say is his WOBA increased 76 points from 2023 to 2024, but his expected WOBA only increased 28 points. So that's just to say that his on the surface stuff improved a lot more than his under the surface stuff. And he also had the sixth luckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average and increased his BABIP by 71 points from 2023 to 2024. And yeah, so and I guess on the defensive side, something that looked really good is his outs above average went from +1 in 135 games to +5 in 86 games. But to summarize, I'm impressed with his offensive and defensive improvements, but his offensive improvement wasn't as drastic as the results say. So I don't really expect him to be a 152 OPS plus guy next year. I expect him to be somewhere in maybe like the low 130s. High 120s, maybe a little bit above that. And yeah, I guess the last thing you can say is, there's very few instances where I'm gonna necessarily factor in health, but he is someone who has struggled with it historically. He's only played 140 plus games in a season once since 2016. And he's kind of had a lingering plantar fasciitis thing, which took him out for much of last year, and I think he was dealing with that for all of 2023. So that is something to look out for. And unfortunately, kind of has to go against him. But yeah, Carlos Correa at number 9. Although I see many reasons for him to be above that. Who do you have at number 8?
Chris, when has anyone ever been concerned about Carlos Correa's injury history? Yeah,
Yeah,
come on.
it
What are
definitely
you talking about? No one's ever said that.
it's definitely never cost him over $100 million.
No, 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 no. Not that. And even if it has, it's not like it's happened twice. Come on
Exactly,
now.
exactly.
Yeah. I'm talking about Dansby Swanson in my number 8 spot. I would imagine you probably have him higher on the list. I know you've always been a big Dansby guy. He was my number 4 last year, so he is dropping a bit. Um, of all the defensive talent that we have on this list, Dansby Swanson is, I would say, still the best defensive shortstop in all of baseball. He put together 18 outs above average last year. The best among all shortstops. He put together a 97th percentile fielding run value. Uh, Additionally, he's also an elite base runner, even if he doesn't necessarily have the sprint speed to show it. He makes really good base running decisions, and it kind of shows in all of his other statistics. The offense has been slightly declining every year. He only had a 312 OBP last year. He had a sub 400 slug, was barely over 700 for the OPS. But I think there's still room for optimism. Dansby's ground ball rate went from 52.7% from March through June of last year to 47.4% from July through September, which is a over 5% decrease between inside the season itself. Over that span, his weighted runs created plus went from 87 to 110. So I'm not saying there's direct correlation there, but I think there's definitely something. So the offense can be a concern with Dansby, but he showed signs within last season that it can be better in 2025. So I think there's definitely a little more optimism on that front for me there. But obviously the defense is what it is. The base running is what it is, and that's fantastic. At the end of the day, though, he still did have a 5% gain in ground ball rate, a 2% drop in fly ball rate, and also a 3% drop in the line drive rate, which I don't love seeing those out of a guy that's it's supposed to be primarily a contact type of hitter. But even then, Dansby, had quite the drop in home runs total last year. He went from 25 in 2022 to 22 in 2023 to just 16 in 2024. And obviously, that first year he was on the Braves, so that's a bit of an unfair justification. But regardless, I have him as my number 8. I still think he's the best defensive shortstop in the game. I would like to see a little more offense. I don't know how capable he is of that.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, my number 8 is your number 9. It is Willie Adames. I had him at number 9. I matched him last year at number 9. And yeah, he is heading into his age 29 season, coming off a pretty good payday, 7-year $182 million deal with the Giants. But yeah, still, even despite, going into free agency, he's still in his 20s. Um, and last year, had some good highs last year. He finished fifth among shortstops in F4 last year, and he ranks ninth over the last 2 years. And he's coming off career highs in expected slugging and expected WOBA, which is stuff I like to see. Like, results are results, but when you're putting together some good under the surface stuff, I like that heading into a season. And yeah, from 2023 to 2024, he had a significant decrease in ground ball rate and a significant increase in fly ball rate, while keeping his pop-up rate about the same. Usually when, fly ball rate goes up, pop-up rate goes up as well. But he kept his pop-up rate fairly similar to what it was in previous years. And then along with the, good trends in ground ball rate and fly ball rate, he increased his average exit velocity. And then also he stole a career high 21 bases on 25 attempts. So yeah, not only did his hitting do better, but he was a better base runner as well. Um, and yeah, I guess the one detraction from or the one regression from 2023 to 2024 was his defense. It got, it got worse last year, but what it will, it was elite the 2 years before, and sometimes on defense, with evaluations, there can be outlying seasons, and I don't know if that's necessarily a trend or an outlier. So I'm sure he's still a pretty good defender. So I'm not necessarily going to put that completely against him. And even in a down year, he was at +1 outs above average. So yeah, I really like what I saw from Willy Adames last year, in terms of hitting improvement and base running improvement. So yeah, he's my number 8 this year, and I think on a lot of other lists he'd be a lot further up. Who do you have at number 7?
Yeah, at number 7, again, this is a guy. This is the only newcomer I have on the list completely. Guy who wasn't on any list of mine last year, but made some major improvements to the point where I decided it was time to talk about Ellie De La Cruz on one of these lists. And number 7 is quite low for a guy of his talent. And the results that he put up last year and the results that I think he's capable of putting up. But yeah, like I mentioned, the shortstop talent is just absurd. He upped his OPS by 100 points. Every doubt, most of the doubts that people had about him, uh, he kind of told people off on outside of the strikeouts. But if that's a part of the Ellie De La Cruz game, if strikeouts are a part of it, I'm cool with taking the good with the bad. If he's going to put up a near 92 mile per hour average exit velocity, 13% barrel rate, and just barely above average fly ball rate and line drive rate, I think that's an excellent trade off to make, and one that I would take every single time. Yeah, I mean, Ellie De La Cruz, we know him as one of the best power speed threats maybe in the game, right? I mean, in terms of just the sheer ceiling of power that he has, the ceiling of base running ability that he has. 25 home runs and 67 stolen bases last year, along with elite defense at shortstop, something that I wasn't too sure of coming into this year, but I mean, he really did it. Again, he did it 2 years in a row now with 100 percentile sprint speed as well. Despite the bad strikeout rate and whatnot, his chase rate was actually pretty good. It wasn't. It was 32.8% last year. It went down to 26.9% this year. Obviously the whiff rates and stuff are still what they are. But I mean, if the chase rate could go down, maybe it could provide some hope for the strikeout rates and the whiff rates. But regardless, he's obviously a very good power hitter. He's one of the most fun players to watch when he's on. And one thing that I really like is how he finished the season last year, specifically on some of the things that he has more control over. His average bat speed went from 74.7 miles per hour from March through July to 76 miles per hour from August through September. So that's over a 1 mile per hour increase over the last 2 months of the season. His fast swing percentage went from 50.2% before the span to 60.2% in this span. So um, that's obviously something that he can control more. It definitely has a tendency to lead to more sort of power and some of the things that we like from Ellie De La Cruz. I really like that's how he finished the season after playing a full season. Normally, you'd expect the other way around, where he goes all out through April and May, and kind of coast through the rest of the season. But I think it's very encouraging that he, kind of brought it up a little more towards the end of the season. So I have him in my number 7 spot.
Right, right. Yeah, he's certainly proved us wrong in a lot of ways this past year. Um My number seven is Dansby Swanson. You had him at number eight. I had him at number three last year. And yeah, he had a decent year last year, but in terms of, when you're going up against the guys you're going up against, you are going to drop down the list if you're not if you're not basically an MVP candidate. So yeah, he goes down the list a little bit. He's heading into his age 31 season, and he finished eighth among shortstops in F4 last year, and he ranks sixth among them over the last 2 years. Um, what I did like from Dansby Swanson is how, like with De La Cruz, how Swanson finished the season, at least in terms of results. He ranked third among shortstops in F4 from August on last year. And, some of the offensive struggles he was having sort of righted themselves. But still, yeah, overall, I'm kind of looking at the offense as a whole. But yeah, looking at defense, he leads all fielders in outs above average over the last 3 years. Um, that's among, not just among shortstops, but among all fielders. And on offense, that's where some of the concerns lie. His ground ball rate has increased and his fly ball rate has decreased each of the last 2 years, which has led to his home run total and slugging dropping both of those years. So in 2022, he was at a pretty good spot, but in 2023 and 2024, he's suffered some regression in that aspect. So that's led to just his general offensive production dropping a little bit. So that kind of drops him down the list a little bit, but I would agree that he is, just kind of consensus best defensive shortstop in the game. And his offense isn't bad enough to where I'm, completely dropping him off the list. So yeah, he's my number seven shortstop in baseball. Who do you have at number six?
Yeah, number six. This is where I put Carlos Correa. You put him at number nine. Last year I put him at number eight. So there is a bit of a discrepancy for him between us here. I still really like Carlos Correa. I think despite obviously the health concerns and maybe the smaller sample size last year with only 367 plate appearances, I think he's much, much closer to what we saw last year with the 905 OPS than what we saw previously in 2023 with the 711 OPS. I think he's quite considerably closer to that, and I wouldn't be shocked if he stays above like 850 this year, with elite defense and with manageable base running. Like you mentioned, Chris, 5 outs above average last year. He's still very good at the shortstop position. He's entering his 30s now. And I still think there's a lot of reason to be excited about him. First of all, he had his lowest career strikeout percentage last year at 16.6%. He also had his lowest career whiff rate last year at 20.4%. So I really like that. It's obviously a good thing to look at going into age 30. Normally, that's some stuff that you start to see going up by that time. The xwOBA was at 358 last year. Chris, I know that you were concerned about the lack of a increase between the expected statistics from last year to this year. Carlos Correa pulled 36% of his fly balls, the highest of any shortstop I have on this list, and a career high for him by 6.6%. It gave him the largest home run to fly ball ratio at 23% that he's had since 2017. And we know that the expected statistics obviously don't really consider where you hit the ball in the field. I think this increase from Correa sort of explains the lack of the increase in expected statistics because all these balls are getting pulled by him. That's where he's getting his increased results. And yeah, like I mentioned, the highest pull rate on fly balls throughout his career by nearly 7%. That's really encouraging for me going forward. I think it's good that he's timing balls up a lot better now than he has been, on that front. And with the elite defense, with the potential power that he still has, I still think he's an elite shortstop in the game when he's on the field. Obviously, that is the major question is when he's on the field. But I'm putting him number six. I have some big expectations for him this year if he can stay healthy. I really do feel optimistic that he can continue to be one of the elite shortstops in the game.
Right, right. Yeah, at my number six, this is where I put Ellie De La Cruz.
Mhm.
He was not on my list last year. So yeah, he's the only guy on this list that was not on any list last year. And yeah, Ellie De La Cruz is heading into his age 23 season. So yeah, it's easy to forget, how young he is, considering the level of the level of the quality of a season that he just had. Yeah, he ranked fourth among shortstops in F4 last year. He led Major League Baseball in stolen bases. He led all players in stolen bases, and he led shortstops in BSR. And he ranked fifth among shortstops in outs above average. So he was an elite base runner. He was the best base runner among shortstops last year, and also one of the best defenders as well. And then, along with that, a 119 OPS plus. So on all fronts, he was at least doing pretty well. He had a significant decrease in ground ball rate and a significant increase in fly ball rate and barrel rate this past year, which sort of quelled some of those offensive concerns that we had about him. And that it kind of showed up in the results, and that's why in 2023 he was a significantly below average hitter, and in 2024 he was not, and he was a significantly above average hitter. So yeah, and it was, I would say it was very hard to put him at number six, considering the level of season that he just had. But it's just because he has a great class of players ahead of him. Not often do you put a guy who just had a 6-win season at number six in a positional list, but that's just the level of the level of players, at the position here this upcoming year. So yeah, who do you have at number five?
Number five, I think this is really where I start to get bold here. I think there's a very good possibility we could be looking at this one in November and laughing for me being hilariously wrong. But I put Mookie Betts in my number five spot. And how do you justify putting four players of any on any list ahead of Mookie Betts? Well, I'm gonna try my best. Look, he did get injured last year. He was hit by a pitch in June that took him out for a couple months, and he didn't exactly look the same after the injury. He looked like he looked like Mookie Betts, before the injury, was an awesome player. But still, I think there are some minor concerns that I have, which, given the amount of talent on this list, that just kind of makes him fall below a few other people. His barrel rate last year fell from 12.4% to just 6%, the lowest that he's had in a season since 2017. The highest barrel rate that he had in any month was only 7% in June, the month that he got hurt. So there is, I don't love that. I mean, that's definitely not a great sign. Another thing is that there was a steady decrease in pull rate that also was happening before the injury. It went from 45.4% last year to 34.3% in 2024. The 11.1% drop in pull rate was the third steepest decrease among qualifiers. He also had lows since 2017, like I mentioned, barrel rate. Also in average exit velocity, his average exit velocity was below 90 miles per hour for the first time in 7 seasons. So that was, something I obviously didn't love. Of course, he's still Mookie Betts. Of course, he's still one of the best players in the game. He will be on my top 50. Will probably at least be in my top 20, maybe 15. But the shortstop defense also wasn't fantastic last year. It wasn't bad considering he's never really played it to a steady degree in the big leagues. But obviously, there's a lot of talent on this list, so I had to be bold and put four players above him. I have Mookie Betts, my number one second baseman from last year, as my number five shortstop.
Yeah, I'll stay bold with you because I have Mookie Betts at
Wow.
number five as
Wow.
well. And yeah, and I'm not even I don't even think that speaks much to the lack of quality of Mookie Betts. It just speaks to
No, no.
how
That's
amazing
how
I think.
deep this list is.
Yeah, it speaks to how amazing I think the other four guys are. Yeah, Mookie Betts, he was not on this list last year because he was, they, the, the word was he was going to be a second baseman, or he was, I think the Dodgers announced he was supposed to be the starting second baseman. So I had him as the number one second baseman in baseball last year. But yeah, he's the number five shortstop in baseball. For me, heading into 2025, he's heading into his age 32 season. He ranked seventh among shortstops in F4 last year and ranks fourth over the last 2 years. And yeah, he did miss some time last year, but he's still qualified for all the rate stats. He still had over 500 plate appearances and whatnot. So him ranking seventh among shortstops in F4, I don't think is necessarily it's not a complete misrepresentation of what he did last year. And but yeah, just he is one of the most elite hitters on this list. Arguably arguably the best hitter on this list. Among 26 shortstops with 800 plus plate appearances over the last 2 years, Betts ranks second among them in OPS. But yeah, just looking at what happened last year, his average exit velocity dropped 2.5 miles per hour, and his barrel rate was cut by more than half from 2023 to 2024. I think a lot of what I was optimistic about last year with him was he made great improvements in those areas, but it seemed like they've kind of gone back to where it used to be, or even worse than what it used to be. Um, but in terms of things that were positive, 98th percentile strikeout rate and 92nd percentile walk rate. Those are elite numbers. He was the only player in baseball to have 92nd percentile or higher in both categories. That's, that is no matter what your average exit velocity and barrel rates are, that's going to put you in a good offensive spot. And it's part of the reason why he had a 145 OPS plus last year. But yeah, and then on defense, he had -4 outs above average at the shortstop position, +3 defensive runs saved. So maybe there is some sort of optimism to be had about his defensive ability at shortstops. It's still we're still kind of waiting to see where he is at defensively at shortstop. So, but yeah, he's definitely not among the elite class at the position on the defensive end. So, can't necessarily put that for him. But yeah, I'm still pretty optimistic about what he can do offensively, but not necessarily the best defender. And just yeah, there's unfortunately there's four better guys on this list. So yeah, I think yeah, he will be better represented on the top 50 list
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
Um, who do you have at number four?
Yeah, number four, I think another guy, like you said, that will be better represented on the top 50 list because given the season this guy had last year, yeah, it's hard to name three guys better, but I'm going with Gunnar Henderson from the Baltimore Orioles in my number four spot. Yeah, this guy had a phenomenal season last year. There's no other way to really put it. He had, yeah, an 893 OPS, of 97 percentile hard hit rate. Very good across the board, also very good defensively for a 22-year-old or excuse me, a 23-year-old playing the shortstop position. He was an all-star and, an MVP candidate around the first half of the season. Like a lot of his teammates, he did tail off a bit in the second half, but regardless, it was still a phenomenal season for him. I would like to see him hit a little bit better against four-seam fastballs and also just, I guess, fastballs in general. He had a 0 run value on four-seamers, a -1 on sinkers, and a -1 on cutters last year. And obviously, four seam fastballs specifically are the pitches that you see the most. I would like to see him hitting a little bit better on those. I mean, he wasn't bad by any means. He hit 245 with a 473 slugging on four seamers, which is very good, but we're talking about Gunnar Henderson here. Now, that being said, he is probably the best breaking ball hitter in the entire league. He posted a 23 run value and 12 run value per 100 against breaking balls in 2024. Both of those led the 255 hitters with at least 100 plate appearances that ended on breaking balls. So you throw him a curveball or slider, you're doomed. You throw him a changeup, it also is you're doomed, not a breaking ball, but he did very well against those as well. I would love to see him hit a little bit better on four seamers, but regardless, he was absolutely phenomenal against breaking balls. He had a really solid season. And was an MVP candidate for much of the year. I think that can continue very much in 2025. But for now, I think there are three shortstops that I anticipate will be better.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought I was gonna be the Corey Seager optimist, but apparently I'm the Corey Seager pessimist because I have him at number four. He ranked number one on my shortstop list last year. Um, but yeah, he's heading into his age 31 season. He ranked sixth among shortstops in F4 last year, and he ranks fifth over the last 2 years. Among 26 shortstops over the last 2 years, he has the highest OPS. So yeah, I think he is the best hitter on this list. Although his OPS plus went from 174 to 145 last year. However, much of that regression was really luck based, unfortunately for him. He had the eighth unluckiest difference in slugging and expected slugging out of 216 batters last year, and that was despite having the highest rate of fly balls being pulled of his career. So it's not necessarily it didn't the difference in slugging and expected slugging did not have to do with where he was hitting his fly balls. It because he was pulling fly balls at the highest rate of his career. And yeah, just like in terms of underlying stats, they were all really, really elite. He had 72nd percentile strikeout rate and walk rate, 88th percentile sweet spot rate, 91st percentile average exit velocity, and was 95th percentile or higher in all expected categories, while also putting up +5 outs above average. So yeah, I mean that's just a really good sign heading into a year. If like he probably, I think his OPS was 865 last year. He probably should have had like a 920 something, 930 something OPS based on his underlying numbers. It just happened that he ran into a bit of bad luck. His BABIP went down a good bit. His BABIP should be naturally high, but it was below average last year. And yeah, like I'm expecting him to do maybe not what he did in 2023, but I expect him to probably be a little bit closer to what he did in 2023 than what he did in 2024, based on the fact that not a whole lot changed in terms of what he was actually in terms of what was in his control last year. It just the ball seemed to find some more gloves last year, unfortunately. I guess the one detraction I do have, and maybe what dragged him down below one or two other guys, is he's only played 125 plus games once in the last 5 years. I guess 2020, no one played 125 plus games, but in the last 4 years, he's only played 125 plus games once. So yeah, last year he started out the year with a groin issue and ended the year with a hip issue. So yeah, he hasn't necessarily been known for staying on the field, and I guess I can rely on the other three to stay on the field a little bit more. But that's a very small thing compared to everything else. I really expect a good year from Corey Seager this upcoming year. Who do you have at number three?
Yeah, everything you just said is pretty much exactly why I put Corey Seager in my number three, because I do think he's better than what he should have been better than what he was last year. He deserved more than an 865 OPS. He deserved more than a 140 weighted runs created plus. And I think if he does everything the same way this year, there's no reason why we shouldn't see him at a much higher on a much higher value in terms of wins above replacement, in terms of offensive value and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said everything that I wanted to say. Seager's pull rate on fly balls increased. His barrel rate on fly balls remained the same. His barrel rate on what I said, his barrel rate on fly balls remained the same, and his barrel rate on pulled fly balls went up. Yeah, despite this, his home run to fly ball ratio went down from 26.7% to just 21.8%. I don't believe that should have continued. And I think if we play this season over again, giving him the exact same metrics on everything that I just mentioned, we should see more from him. And that's why I put him in my three. I'm banking on Corey Seager continuing to do what he did with the underlying stuff and actually getting the results that he deserves. Yeah, I mean, a 561 expected slugging and a 512 actual slugging with good pull numbers, which is weird. Usually that's the other way around. Obviously, still elite as a overall hitter with all the barrel metrics. Hard hit percentage was high, sweet spot rate was very good for him. Yeah, I don't know. I think you kind of just took everything out of my mouth that I wanted to say. Also, the reason I put him above Gunnar Henderson, one thing I do say often is a tiebreaker can be how they are against four seam fastballs, and Corey Seager has always been an elite hitter on four seamers. He's had at least one run value per 100 against four seamers in every year since 2019. Can pretty much bank on it again this year, I would say. And that's always a tiebreaker for me because that's the pitch that you see the most. If you do well against it, I think if you do well enough against everything else, you'll be very good. So I'm gonna put Corey Seager in my three. I'm banking on a much better season from him in 2025.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm excited to see what he has in store. My number three is Gunnar Henderson. He was my number three third baseman last year. but that's not to say that he is that I view him in the same light as I did last year, because he's certainly gone up the list on the overall players. But yeah, Gunnar Henderson is heading into his age 24 season. He ranked second among shortstops in F4 last year and ranks third over the last 2 years. He made some major hitting improvements last year. Definitely in terms of results, his OPS plus went from an already good 125 to an elite 159 from 2023 to 2024. And was 80th percentile or higher in walk rate and chase rate last year, was a 92nd percentile or higher in all expected categories, as well as bat speed, average exit velocity, and hard hit rate. And I think what separated Gunnar Henderson from Corey Seager from me was the base running. He went 21 for 25 on stolen bases with a 51% extra base taken rate, and also +3 runner runs, which is a new StatCast metric that measures kind of what you do what you do as a runner when the ball is in play, when you're not necessarily the guy hitting it. So he had +3 runner runs, which is a very good thing, which kind of adds to the extra base taken rate. And yeah, so I'm I'm really hopped up on his hitting improvement, as well as what he was able to do on the bases. And also, he has played 150 plus games each of the last 2 years. So, he's been able to stay on the field along with, great performance, which resulted in, I think, an 8-win season for him last year, which is pretty absurd for a 23-year-old. So, also with youth being on his side, I think that brings him up the list. But overall, just really impressed with what he was able to do last year, and there's potentially even more he could do this upcoming year. Who do you have at number two?
Yeah, number two, this is where I put Francisco Lindor, my number three shortstop of 2024. And now he's my number two, which, I mean, he moved up a spot. Did he deserve to? Maybe. I mean, he should probably, if anything, deserve to be number two last year. But I made a bold prediction. Regardless, he was an excellent, excellent player last year. Finally did something to get the recognition he deserved. It should have taken all that. But regardless, he went out and put up a 500 slugging percentage with elite base running and elite defense and Francisco Lindor defense. I don't even think we need to call it elite. We know who he is. We've known who he is for a very long time on the show. His barrel rate went up to 13.6% last year, a new career high for him. His sweet spot rate stayed around the rate that it has been at, around 35%, which is excellent. Strikeout numbers were low. Walk numbers were high enough. The ground ball rate was actually quite low, lower, usually kind of as low as it has been. A lot of the batted ball metrics in terms of type of fly ball stayed relatively the same, except for there was actually a good decrease in pop-up rate, 2.7%, which always love to see less pop-ups out of hitters. That one kind of goes without saying. But the power numbers were really on display last year, better than they have been in previous years, at least, since the end of the juice ball era. Lindor barreled up 31% of his fly balls in 2024, which is a new career high for him. He also had a 96 mile per hour average exit velocity on line drives. This was a career high for him. So when he was hitting the ball the way that you want to, he was doing it very well. He was hitting hard fly balls. He was hitting hard line drives, doing them at a good rate, playing that elite defense that we know him to be, and also, base running very well. Yeah, 3 runner runs, like you mentioned with Gunnar Henderson as well. There just really wasn't an area where Francisco Lindor wasn't a very good player last year, and I'm very excited to see what he has in store next year. I have him as my number two shortstop.
Yeah, I also have Francisco Lindor as my number two shortstop. He was number two for me last year, and yeah, he actually wasn't. He probably wasn't even in the top two among shortstops last year in terms of well, definitely in terms of wins above replacement. He's heading into his age 31 season. He ranked third among shortstops in F4 last year, but ranked second over the last 2 years. And he's coming off career highs in OPS plus, barrel rate, expected slugging, and expected WOBA. He was 90th percentile in barrel rate last year, which is not something that is normal out of Francisco Lindor. And he was 95th percentile in expected slugging and expected WOBA. Along with that, he posted a 3-year high in outs above average and finished third in outs above average among shortstops. and he was one stolen base shy of a second consecutive 30-30 season, and also only got caught 4 times, 29 for 33 on stolen base attempts. And then to put the cherry on top, he has played 150 plus games each of the last 2 years, or each of the last 3 years, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, like, Francisco Lindor didn't really have to prove anyone to anybody, but he went out and put up his best year of his career. Um, you know, Amazed us in both you know, on the surface offensive numbers and under the surface offensive numbers. Let's not forget, he was like the unluckiest hitter in baseball for the first 2 months of the year, and he still managed to find his way into the MVP runner-up spot. Uh, it's pretty amazing. I'm really impressed with what he did last year. I was already high on him last year, but he outdid expectations, and yeah, unfortunately, because of how above and beyond the other guy went, he has to be number 2 on this list.
He does.
But yeah,
Yeah.
without further ado, who is your number one shortstop in baseball?
Yeah, my number one shortstop in baseball. I put him at number two last year. It was considered bold at the time, but I believed, and it paid off. Bobby Witt Jr. is the number one shortstop in baseball. He proved it last year, put up an outstanding season with over 10 FWAR. Was, like I said, elite on pretty much every front. One of the best hitters in the game, perhaps the best base runner in the game, one of the best shortstops defensively in the game. Just an excellent, phenomenal season all around in Kauffman Stadium. Yeah, a 10.9% barrel rate, or excuse me, a 14.3% barrel rate. That's barrels per PA. Yeah, I mean, like everything was just excellent for him last year. To sum it all up, he became one of just 10 players to put up a season with 170 OPS plus, 30 stolen bases, and one D-WAR, which is setting him as elite as a hitter, a base runner, and a fielder. The other 9 players to ever do so are Dan Brothers, Hannes Wagner, Eddie Collins, Home Run Baker, Tris Speaker, Ricky Henderson, Barry Bonds, Mike Trout, and Mookie Betts. That is, I mean, when you think of some of the best seasons ever, when you think of some of the best players ever, they're on that list, and Bobby Witt Jr. is with them. There are some phenomenal players that aren't on that list. Think about that. Think about the fact that Willie Mays never did exactly specifically what Bobby Witt Jr. did last year in terms of all of those numbers put together. I know that he played in maybe in some cases more of an offensive era, and it was tougher to put up a 170 OPS plus, but regardless, Bobby Witt Jr. just completely showed out last year. Even in Kauffman Stadium, he still got the results, a 977 OPS, a 332 batting average. Even with a low pull rate, he still got the results. This is a 25-year-old going into this year who already got his money, right? He doesn't have to play for anything. He's a Kansas City Royal for life, as he is, agreed to. And yeah, I mean, there's really not much else to say. The numbers kind of speak for themselves. He was, and they even without the numbers, if you watched him play last year, you know that he's the best shortstop in the game. He showed it last year, and it is very exciting that we get to watch this guy for the next decade plus on the Royals.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Yeah, and like and with that number of 170 OPS plus, 30 home or 30 stolen bases and one D-WAR, live ball era, it's just him, what, Henderson, Bonds, Trout, and Betts
Yeah, the last one was Speaker, right?
for did Speaker do it in the live ball era?
He might have. He played from 1907 to 27. I know that.
Yeah, I don't think
Let
he
me
would have done
check. When did Tris Speaker do this?
I don't think he would have done it in the live ball. I think, especially given that it's an OPS plus and not OPS.
Yeah, the last he did put up a 177 and 182 OPS plus in the live ball era. I don't know if he put up one DWAR.
Right.
No, he did not. He only did it in 1914.
Uh-huh.
What
So
about Home Run Baker? Yeah, no, he definitely wouldn't have done it.
yeah, given he was named Home Run Baker and he hit like 12 per year,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't think
they
he
they had one chance to dish out that nickname and they did not deliver. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong, Home Run Baker was a great player, but I mean, man, he led the league in home runs 3 times. When did they actually name him Home Run Baker?
I don't know. Maybe he entered the league that way.
Like he was hit, he was the home run guy before Babe Ruth, so I'll give him that. But yeah, he hit 11 in 1911, 10 in 1912, 12 in 1913, and 9 in 1914. So actually 4 straight years he led the league in home runs. Yeah, they watched him hit 9 home runs in 150 games. They were like, this guy's special home run baker because he hits so many home runs.
Exactly. But
That's like a decent month.
right. But but yeah, my number one is also Bobby Witt Jr. I had him at number four last year. Um, and yeah, he definitely rises up the list because that's what happens when you put up over 10 F4. He is you know, along with that, he's very young. He's heading into his age 25 season. Led shortstops in F4 last year, and he leads shortstops in F4 over the last 2 years. And yeah, even though he had a really good 2023, he made some significant improvements, which made him an elite player this past year. He increased his average exit velocity 2.0 miles per hour and barrel rate by 2.8 percentage points. He also increased his walk rate while decreasing his strikeout rate and was 98th percentile or higher in all expected categories. And then also he was 94th percentile in average exit velocity and 92nd percentile in barrel rate. And along with being an elite hitter, he has the second most outs above average among shortstops over the last 2 years, and he won a Gold Glove in 2024. Uh, and then, along with being both an elite hitter and an elite defender, he ranks second in BSR among shortstops over the last 2 years and had a 63% extra base taken rate last year, and ranked third in all of MLB in runner runs, which is what I explained with the Gunnar Henderson numbers. So, yeah, not to mention 31 stolen bases, which made him a 30-30 player, along with being a Gold Glover. So yeah, it's everywhere. Everywhere on the field he dominated last year. Everywhere on the field he's been dominating the past 2 years. So yeah, pretty astounding what he's been able to do pretty much since like July of 2023. Turns him into the best shortstop in baseball. So yeah, that does it for this list. I guess we can go 10 through 1 with our lists.
Yeah, I mean, we had the same 10 shortstops, which I think we were kind of predicting before the show. Obviously, different order, but I had Trey Turner, my number 10, Willie Adames, 9, Dansby Swanson, 8, Ellie De La Cruz, 7, Carlos Correa, 6, Mookie Betts, 5, Gunnar Henderson, 4, Corey Seager, 3, Francisco Lindor, 2, and Bobby Witt Jr., number 1.
I had Trey Turner at number 10, Carlos Correa at number 9, Willie Adames at number 8, Dansby Swanson at number 7, Ellie De La Cruz at number 6, Mookie Betts at number 5, Corey Seager at number 4, Gunnar Henderson at number 3, Francisco Lindor at number 2, and Bobby Witt Jr. at number 1. This probably has the most overlaps so far that we've had in a list, I would imagine.
Yeah, which
Um,
this, if there was going to be a list, it would be this one. Like there was a clear cut 10, I think. I
yeah.
don't even, to be honest, I don't even remember who I considered after Trey Turner.
Um, Yeah, no, it like there really wasn't too much to consider unless you were banking on like a Bo Bichette bounce back year
Yeah,
or JP Crawford to get back to what he was in 2023. Like yeah, it was there not much competition. I wouldn't be surprised if like all 10 of them are in my top 50 or at least 9 of them.
I was
Um
thinking the same thing. Yeah.
so so yeah, but yeah, we had the same number 10, we had the same number 5, and then same number 1 and number 2. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, we
Really, the
definitely
only big discrepancies are Correa and uh, Henderson slash Seager.
um yeah, pretty much just Correa.
Because I mean,
Yeah,
we agreed on like the order of like Dansby and then Ellie.
yeah, exactly.
It's just
Um
we had different ideas of Carlos Correa and Adames, but like, yeah.
yeah, I'm actually now that so yeah,